Hi, my name is Andy and welcome to the Andy's Auto YouTube channel. If you're just tuning in, this is part 3 of bringing this old scooter back to life. So we're going to go ahead and do the oil changes and check the valve adjustment today. So stay tuned. Alright, here it is, guys. I decided to go ahead and pull it outside today. So, unfortunately, it's kind of hard to take this piece off, this front panel here, because I think that these screws right here are part of what holds it on. This one here, and there's another one on the opposite side here. And with the frame in the way, those are nearly impossible to get out. So we got a little bit of access to the valve cover here through this front cover that I removed and set right there. So we're going to go ahead and pull off this valve cover, and we're going to go ahead and check the valve adjustment. I went ahead and removed the PCV hose from the air intake side instead of from the valve cover, because even though I just put that thing on there, it's already married to the valve cover. So I'm just going to do it the easy way, remove it like that. We want to check our gasket to make sure that it's not damaged. And I'll be completely honest with you, we almost never replace these gaskets when we take the valve cover off. A lot of people don't do anything, but I do at least put a thin layer of that Permatex Right stuff on it. It's my favorite RTV ever. I have literally never had a leak when I used that stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and put some of that on here whenever we go to put it back on. But that's what we're working with right now, and now we need to get the engine at top dead center. Alright, so over here on the right side of the scooter, I just went ahead and removed this cover. Simply 4 bolts, or actually 2 bolts and 2 screws. And if you really want to, you can put a socket on this, but it's so easy to turn by hand. You can just turn the engine by hand. And there's a couple marks that you want to look at. One of them down here is for T, top dead center. And you want it to line up with this little notch right here, which I believe that it is. And then also, I'll try my best to show you guys, but there's a hole in the center of the cam sprocket, and you want that to be pointed upward, at least relative to the engine, and I believe that we have that as well. So we should be able to do a valve adjustment now. And the valve adjustment, what we're going to do is there's a pin right here, and it goes all the way through the rocker arm, and it comes out here on the valve. And as you can see, there's a little bit of movement in it, and that's good. We want it to be a certain amount, but we need to measure that amount using a filler gauge. So in order to check that, we're going to stick the feeler gauge in between the valve and the tip of this, and if it needs any adjustment, we will loosen this nut, and we'll get a pair of pliers or something, or by hand, and spin it until the measurement between there is correct. And that is on the intake side right there. Then the fun part is you have to come down here and check it again on the exhaust side right here. And so sometimes the exhaust can be a little difficult to get at, and I'll try my best to get you guys in there. You can kind of just barely see it sticking through there. It's pretty much the same procedure on the top and the bottom. And if I remember right, it's like .004 on the intake and .005 on the exhaust. I'll have to look it up again just to be sure, but I'm going to go ahead and start checking and making sure that those are at the correct spec. So I did check on it, and it is the .004 to .005. Any of those will do. I usually do 4 on the exhaust, or excuse me, 4 on the intake, 5 on the exhaust, just because the exhaust expands a little more due to heat and everything. But this .4 feeler gauge will not go in there on either side, but it seems even tighter on the exhaust side. So I believe that's part of the reason why this engine will not start, in addition to having the super varnished up fuel, is because the valve adjustment is set too tight. So we're going to need to loosen that to where this fits in there and not much more. And once we've done that, then the valve adjustment will be done and we can put the valve cover back on. Alright guys, we are all finished up with the valve adjustment. Sorry I couldn't film me actually doing the adjustment, but I feel that I explained it pretty well. Basically, like I said, you just loosen that nut and then you turn the pin, you tighten the nut, you measure it, you hope that you're on point. If not, you try again until you get it exactly where you want it. On the top I have it where the 4 fits in and the 5 does not. On the bottom where the exhaust is, I have it where the 5 fits in and the 6 does not. Some people will just put them the same, but I've had decent luck with putting the exhaust just a little bit higher than the intake, because it does get a little hotter and therefore it may expand. So in theory, while the engine is hot, they should be at roughly the same clearance. So now we can go ahead and put the valve cover back on. Alright, I went ahead and put some RTV on the back of there, extremely thin layer. I got lucky, is about all I had left. Went ahead and put this cover back on, and I'm probably going to go ahead and put this cover back on as well. And then we can move on to doing the oil changes. Alright guys, here we are the next day. I didn't get it all done yesterday. We're going to go ahead and get started on these oil changes now. These engines actually have 2 drain plugs. You probably don't have to, but I prefer to take them both out one at a time and then maybe lean the scooter one way or the other. But we'll go ahead and get started with this one here. It's a 17 millimeter, so I'm going to loosen that and let the oil drain out. Alright, we got this plug loose. Let's see what this oil that's probably never been changed from 2008 looks like. Surprisingly, not too bad. So we'll let that drain out and then we'll put the plug back in, and then we'll move on to the other drain plug. Alright, and then on the opposite side of the engine is the other drain plug. The one we just took out is right over here. I need to wipe that off. I got the plug in tightened down, just clean that off a little bit. But here's the other drain plug, and there's going to be like a little thimble screen inside of it, and that's essentially your oil filter. You never really replace it like you would on a car. You just clean it up and put it back in there. This one is also a 17 millimeter, so we'll go ahead and remove this one as well. Alright, and then once you get it pulled out, that's kind of what it looks like. The plug, the spring, and the screen are all separate parts. You'll want to go ahead and inspect the screen. If it's damaged, go ahead and replace it. If not, then just clean it off a little bit and put it back in there. Make sure that if you do have a magnetic one, which some of them have upgraded magnetic plugs, to go ahead and wipe off any metal shavings that may be in there. So we're going to go ahead and clean this off and then put it back in. Alright, now that we've got that other drain plug back in, we want to go ahead and fill it up. This is your dipstick and fill cap. So we're going to want to add 750 milliliters into the crankcase. Alright, so the oil of choice for this vehicle is the Rotella 15W40 non-synthetic, just like you might use in a diesel pickup truck. So I've got this measuring cup here, because that's the easiest way to measure it out. It pretty much goes right to 750. And so I just fill this up and then I add it, and then I'll show you how to actually check it once we're done. Alright, so in order to check the oil, you go ahead and you put it in, but you do not thread it down, and then you pull it out. And as long as you're pretty close to the top of the safe zone and you've also measured out the 750, then you should be good to go on the engine oil. Now on to the differential. Right, so back here on the back side by the rear wheel, you have the fill plug and the drain plug for the differential. Always loosen the fill plug first, because if the drain plug comes out and the fill plug does not, then you're kind of screwed and you won't be able to get any fluid back in there. So I went ahead and loosened these up. Go ahead and remove this one, and then we'll remove the lower one, which is this one, once again, and we'll let the fluid drain out. Alright, so you got the fill plug out and the oil or the drain plug out. We got the fluid draining. So once that's finished up, you can put the plugs back in, or the lower one anyway. And then when you fill it up, I like to just go ahead and add until it starts to drain out of the fill plug with it on a level surface, and then you should be able to put the plug back in. I believe it's like 110 milliliters or something, but it's not as easy to put an exact amount into the differential as it is into the engine. So that's just the way that I do it. Alright, so for the differential, I'm going to use this 7590 full synthetic. 7590 is what's recommended. You don't have to use full synthetic, but I just have some, so that's what I'm going to use. So I got a helper leaning the scooter for me while I put this into the fill plug, and then you just kind of slowly add, make sure it's not dripping out like crazy and it's getting on the ground instead of inside there. And then once you start to see it overflow, you can level it back out, and then once it stops dripping a little bit, then you can go ahead and put the fill plug back in as well. Alright guys, so we got the fill plug back in, everything's good to go. I wanted to give a little bit of more background on it that I haven't really shown in the video. Whenever I did the valve adjustment, I decided to go ahead and try to start it afterwards, and it did run. It was idling kind of low, but it had a new carburetor, so I hadn't really messed with the idle speed. I went ahead and turned up the idle speed. It took several times of kick starting, cranking, just kind of turning the engine over, working itself in, because it's been sitting not running for a very long time. So I was able to actually get it running, and then we only had just a little bit of 87 octane in the garage that we use on the lawnmower, and so I put that in there. And today, just a moment ago, when I finished up with this differential oil, I took it up to the gas station and filled it up with premium. And so I'm probably going to cut the video here. In the next video, we're going to go ahead and do the spark plug, the wire and coil, as well as what they call the CDI box, which is basically like an ignition module or ignition computer. And we are also going to be replacing the CVT belt inside the transmission, as well as inspecting the other components, making sure everything else is good to go. Also, let me flip the camera around. I want to show you guys. I reached in there and I took out the plug already, and when I did, the whole engine cover on the bottom side just busted open, unfortunately. I reached in here, I grabbed the wire, and I gave a little bit of pressure with the bottom of my hand here. I put some pressure against it trying to pull the wire out, and it just completely shattered this plastic from 2008. So unfortunately, we're going to have to probably get a new engine cover slash fan shroud, because this here is actually the cooling fan inside of there, and it sucks air in and it routes it over the engine, in through the fins and everything. So we got the spark plug out and the coil connection right here, and I'll show you guys that when we go to put it back together. But before I ended the video, I did want to show you guys that unfortunately I busted the damn fan shroud open just because it's so old and brittle. So we'll definitely have to replace that. So if you like the video, as always, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel. You don't want to miss part 4, where we go ahead and get the rest of these parts installed here. And otherwise, I will see you next time.